Hi, good evening from Eretz Yisrael and Gush Etzion. We have a snowstorm going on outside, but we are actually here to have an interview with Rabbi Avraham Shira, who is sitting here. Now, many of you may know him. Rabbi Shira is a teacher, he's a therapist, a writer, a poet. He gives daily classes on many different platforms, including Patreon, Web Yeshiva, Lighthouse Project, YouTube, etc., etc. And I want to just, bring up some questions and see if we can find out a little bit about you. So, Rabbi Shira, did you want to become a rabbi? How did this begin?
Well, it began on a simple search for the truth, why people suffer, why there seems to be so much disappointment in life, why our pleasure always seemed to let us down, why I was not fulfilled with what the world was offering me. And so I was on a quest to find out the answers to those questions. I had a degree in English, and I bought a van, and I drove all over America. I lived in New Orleans, in New York, LA, Miami, and I would constantly write poetry and interview people and pick up hitchhikers and, give them a sandwich and a cold beer, and they would talk and I would listen, and I wanted to know the secret of why humanity is in the state that it's in. And eventually that desire, that curiosity led me to Los Angeles and to my sister and my brother-in-law, who are Chabad rabbi and rebbitzin. And I saw the way that they ran their family, the way they treated each other and their children, and the respect that children had for their parents. And I said, I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a good husband. And I better learn before I get married. So that was like the entryway into Judaism for me.
So did you grow up with any form of religion at home?
We were conservative Jews. I had a bar mitzvah, and the next day the education was over. And I really didn't understand very much at all. And I understood that the Jewish people were special. There was something about us that I needed to explore. But it took me about another 15 years to figure it out, that I needed to really...
Was there any... Sorry, go on.
Well, that 15 years of interim time, I went to New Age churches, and I studied yoga, and I studied meditation, and I was very friendly with a lot of Christians, and I knew Muslims, and I was very interested in a broad world perspective. And I found that the Orthodox expression that I saw was rather limited for me.
And what was your experience in the New Age style?
Well, I found that the New Age attempt to describe the world was inspiring, but it usually lasted about a couple hours, a day, a couple of days. It didn't really answer all the problems that I found that were in life, and I didn't see a practice to go along with the ideas that were expressed. So Judaism gives us, especially Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy, gives us the spiritual teaching and the physical practice to create what in Kabbalah is a union between the physical and the spiritual, which is expressed as a vessel, is the action itself, and the light in the vessel is your intention. So by unifying the light with the vessel, with the action, with the intention, we create a world. And what is called a world in English really means a spiritual force field, a field of energy that you create yourself through your good deeds with your good intentions, that actually gets recorded in the universal memory, which is another fancy phrase for the memory of God. And so at the end of our days, whenever that might be, after 120 or so years I'm hoping to go a little further because we're waiting for the great redemption. But we understand and we are promised that all our good deeds will go into a spiritual condominium, a place, an energy that you leave. The rabbis say it like this, that a person inherits their haluka de rabbanan. That literally means the cloak of the rabbis. Now, the cloak of the rabbis is a spiritual garment. It is a field of light that surrounds you depending on who you were and what you did in your life. That's your vehicle into the world to come. There's no Tesla, SpaceX ship that's going to take you to heaven. There's no NASA. There's no any way to get to heaven except the vessel that you create here through your good deeds.
Wow. So you had a number of questions and things that propelled you forward. But when did you come to the point of being interested or learning or becoming, learning more, shall we say?
Well, after I began to explore Judaism in Los Angeles, I realized if I want to pursue this in a serious way, I need to go to Jerusalem. And I also love the idea of the city of Tzfat, a place up in the mountains for meditation and isolation and prayer. And so those two ideas really helped me decide to leave the States 30 years ago and to go to Israel with a backpack on my back, and that was about it.
And where did you end up? Where did you arrive when you first got to Israel?
Well, when I first got to Israel, I went to Tzfat, and I met Rabbi Eliezer Koenig, the leader of the Breslov movement in Tzfat, and then I met Rav Yisrael Desser, who was the leader of the Nachman group in Jerusalem, and then I met some Rav Kaduri, and I met a lot of different rabbis, Rav Moshe Ben Tov, and I made it a point to go to all the different rabbis because each rabbi has something special, has a different spark, a different shape of the light. See, every person has a divine spark, but our soul shapes the light according to who we are. So every person has something to teach us, and every person has a way of illuminating other Jews through either his good deeds or his Torah or his prayers or his simple behavior and customs. When you watch the rabbis teach us in the Talmud that this simple everyday speech of a truly learned person, a Talmid Chacham, deserves investigation and learning. So that was the philosophy I had. I also believed in all the different movements in Judaism. I got off the plane and they said, "Who are you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm a Jew." They said, "Well, what kind of Jew?" I said, "Well, I love Chabad, I love Breslov, I love Kabbalah, I love Sephardim, I love all the different flavors." And they said, "Oh, you're Bad Ayin." So I said, "What's Bad Ayin?" And they said, "Oh, just go, you'll find out." And I did, and I've been here 24 years with my wife. We raised 5 children here, and we live on a mountainside. We can see Ashdod, Ashkelon, Aza, Beit Shemesh from our backyard. You feel like you're on the peak of mountains from Jerusalem all the way to Hebron, and you're really on the border of history.
Wow.
Is where we live.
So daily you are at Yeshivat Nahar Shalom in Jerusalem, which is also known as the Yeshivat haMekubalim. So how did this place find you, or did you find it?
Well, I felt drawn to it from when I first heard about it. And then when I went there, I didn't even speak Hebrew. And so I learned that I needed to learn Hebrew, and I needed to immerse myself in that. That's 2, at least. To immerse myself in Hebrew. And I went to another yeshiva where they spoke English and Hebrew, and slowly I learned until I was married, and then I came back to the yeshiva haMekubalim. And by showing up every day, eventually they accepted me into the kollel, which is really an academy for newly married men to continue their studies while they're raising a family. And so I used to learn in the morning, at night, at midnight, at different kollels, and then I delivered newspapers, and I was a janitor, And until I went to graduate school to get a degree in psychology and family therapy. But before that, I would do anything to stay in yeshiva. And I think that's really what gave me I've been there 27 years. So, you have to stick it out to really absorb and to live the Torah. It's not a 3-year degree, a 4-year degree. It's really a lifetime pursuit.
And these days you are appearing very often giving lessons online as well. What is your your niche? What are the things that you very much feel you want to teach, you must teach?
Well, I was always drawn to meditation long before I discovered this great world of Kabbalah and Hasidut. And meditation was something that I practiced in college because one of the teachers said, if you learn meditation, you can read the mind of the teacher and get the answers to the tests beforehand. I said, really?
Seriously?
Seriously. That's what they taught us. And this was in the context of, they weren't teaching you to be dishonest, but they figured if you can read somebody's mind and get the answers, then you're already on the level. But that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But the truth is they did teach that. And I understood only later, Rabbi Nachman says that it's natural to be able to read people's minds if your mind is pure. Why? Because we're all linked on a network of souls. We look like we're individuals, but our souls are part of a collective that's called Knesset Yisrael, which is really a fancy name for the Shekhinah, the divine presence, that dwells in every person. And so when your mind is pure, you're able to receive other people the way they are. And if my mind is not pure, I'm not receiving their thoughts. I'm stuck in my own thoughts. And so the process of purification opens up the mind to be able to understand other people where they are, what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And of course, this is very important in psychology and in therapy. And it's also very important to be able to help people spiritually on their path.
Wow. And can you give us a story of something that was very memorable for you or that made an impact during these years of discovery or also teaching?
Well, I didn't set out to be religious. I really wanted to know the truth, and I understood that the religious people had something special. But I was in LA, and I had a 6-year-old nephew who told me, why don't you have a beard? And I said, oh, leave me alone. I don't want a beard. I had a ponytail. I went across the country in a van with my bench press, and I was very much into the physical culture, if you will. And so I went to do some meditation at Santa Monica Beach. And this crazy idea, a guy came along with blood red eyes and a torn jacket and torn jeans. He looked like he's homeless. He came out of a movie set or something. There was nobody else on the beach. And he said to me, holy men have beards. Why don't you have a beard? And I was like, my nephew just told me I should have a beard. And I told God, I didn't even know if I believed in God, but I said, God, if you're true and you want me to have a beard, I need a sign. And so there was my sign. And so it kind of went that way. And then another rabbi said, you need to buy tefillin. And I said, how much are they? And they said, $500, which is very little nowadays. And I said, well, I don't have $500. I guess God will have to give me tefillin. And that was in the Chabad bookstore on Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles. And the doorbell rang and the little old lady came in. She walked over to the counter. She opened up her bag and she took out a velvet sack. And she said, my son just died. I want someone to wear his tefillin.
Really?
Right. So, I just opened my mouth to God and I said, God, if you want me to have tefillin, show me a sign. And so there was the tefillin, there was the sign, walked right in the door. And so it happened like that over and over and over until I said, if I'm going to be a true person of integrity, then I need to honor my word. So I need to wear these tefillin and wear this tzitzit and grow my beard and all the things that an Orthodox Jew does. But that's really how I got into it. I wasn't just like copying everybody else or doing the cool thing.
Right. It was coming more from the inside, deep inner.
Right. I felt like I had to do it from my own truth. And so that kind of has led me all the way to the yeshiva of haMekubalim, because when I walked in there, I felt at home. You know, the little old rabbis, you know, they're very sweet, they're very kind, they pay, you know, attention to you, they make you a cup of tea, they give you a cookie or a cake, you know, they ask you where you're from and what you're doing. That you feel this true, sincere interest in a person. And they don't treat you just like another person who comes and goes. And so I felt that was a good sign as well, that the sincerity of our appreciation for others is something that has to be in place. Otherwise, what am I doing? I'm chasing God, and I'm not sincere with people. That doesn't really work out too well for me.
So sincerity is a really good subject. But I want to sort of ask you, like, how do you decide what you're going to teach? Are you inspired by something and you want to share it, or does it depend on the students that you get? Where does that come from?
That's a very good question. I teach according to the moment of what is being asked of me. When Yedida Miriam asks me a question in class, that becomes the teaching. Now, I have a daily class in Rabbi Nachman, I have a weekly class in Zohar, I have daily classes and other material. So those are set things which are already chosen. But in general, I try to reach the people that I'm teaching where they are. So because for 25 years, I've been sitting at my table in Nachlaot in Jerusalem, and the people would be coming in, and one guy would sit down and want to talk about the fact that he can't get married. And another guy would talk about the fact that he's angry at the rabbis. And another guy would want to talk about meditation and kabbalah. So I would gear myself to what they wanted to talk about. And I would bring the Torah that I knew about those subjects.
Wow, so that's also a very personable level. It's not necessarily working for like a big educational institution and being told to teach certain things. You're relating it to the people that are literally coming into your life, coming into the yeshiva, essentially.
Right. It was definitely geared towards the individual, and the yeshiva gave me that latitude. You know, we learned Shulchan Aruch, we learned Shas, we learned the basic books of Jewish law, but there was always this need, especially in downtown Jerusalem, if you've ever been around there, you know, it's like the spiritual magnet of the universe is in Jerusalem. And so all the seekers and the searchers and the people who want to know something are going to be bound to come to Jerusalem one day. And that's the way God made it to be. Because Jerusalem is the eye of the universe. And the eye, you know, an eye, the word ayin is also a word for a well or a spring. Just like when you cry, your eye puts out water. So too a spring is like an ayin into the earth that puts out water. And so it's that overflowing quality that when you go to Jerusalem, you feel pushed, inspired, moved to reach something new. And it's coming from within, of course. And so I felt that Jerusalem is the place you have to be.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that. Spending many years in Jerusalem myself before other places.
Well, you're very lucky. And once they said to me, once you live in Jerusalem, there's no place else to go. So I I moved a little bit into the suburbs, but thank God we're still able to jump in the car and you know, every morning you get to Jerusalem and the sun is coming up and it's like the wonder of creation is happening again.
So you teach many different classes, levels, different people, etc. And you yourself have had a very interesting journey that even in this short amount of time it's hard to describe. But can you give any advice to other people that are maybe searching a little bit or wanting to understand more about what Judaism can offer?
Well, you know, when you ask about advice for a lot of people, it's kind of a contradiction because every person is different world. And every person needs different things at different times.
Yeah.
So one advice for everybody is a difficult request. However, Rabbi Nachman says very simply, the main advice is to go out into nature and talk to God with your own words, in your own language, and with your heart open, and tell him your truth. And going out to nature already does a big part of the work, because nature is God's creative endeavor. Just like when you go to a museum and you see great pieces of art, you get inspired by that art or the music or whatever your thing is. Well, nature is God's thing, and his creation is continuous. So when you go out there, you're really in a one-on-one situation with the Creator, and you're not distracted by all the energy of the human race and everything that's going on around us. If you turn off your phone, of course.
Yeah.
And so the one advice that the rabbi gives us is to go out in nature and talk in your own language. And you could talk to God about anything. And I even got to the point sometimes I would talk to God about my anger at him for the Holocaust, my anger at God for, militant terrorism, and my anger about other issues in life. And so I found that, when we confront God that way, he's there with you. He understands even when we're angry with him. But I understood also that my mind is too small to receive those answers. Why the Holocaust? Why terrorism? And why do we have to keep all these mitzvot? Well, as you learn the Torah and you learn the mitzvot and you learn the kabbalah behind the mitzvot, it makes perfect sense. People say, why can't I eat a cheeseburger? And it's very simple, because we don't, in Judaism, we never mix the life force and the death force. There's always kept separate. And cheese is taken from a living animal. And a hamburger, if I'm not mistaken, is coming from a dead animal. Now, so we don't mix life and death. And that's throughout all Jewish law, whether it's a man and a woman's monthly cycle, or it takes place even on the level of shatnez, the mixing of wheat, of flax and wool. That wool is from a living animal, and of course flax is a plant that you have to kill. It has to die in order for you to use it in a garment. And so we do not mix these two forces. Now that explains a lot right there. That if I understand that God is all life. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, and they introduced the concept of death, which is just the opposite of life. Mm-hmm. When they did that, they mixed the forces. And that's why we live in a world today where there is this mixture of life and death. Mm-hmm. But Judaism strives to say, no, we're going back to the garden. We're going back to the way it was originally, which is life is what really exists. Because God never dies. And the soul of a person never really dies. That spark of God in you never dies. Mm-hmm. And so, if you know that and you really believe that, it explains a lot also. Mm-hmm. That we are not part of death. That death is something that came into the world and it needs to be fixed. Mm-hmm. And then we return back to that level before the fall, to the level of what we call Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, which is really the spiritual realm without the constraints of the physical body.
Wow. So earlier in the interview, you mentioned many famous rabbis and how they are able to sort of relate to people. Mm. And then just later on, you were talking about very much a way of sort of living, especially a Jewish life, is to talk to God, literally. Now, if I'm, correct, then that's very much an idea from Rabbi Nachman. How much is Rabbi Nachman prevalent in your teaching?
I would say he's my number one inspiration.
Mm-hmm. And he's known as the Doctor of the Soul, right?
That's a title I think that's been passed around. I think Rabbi Nachman himself said that there is one soul that reveals new Torah for all the other souls. Just like Moses, just like the Arizal HaKadosh, like the Baal Shem Tov, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like Yosef Atzadik. These people revealed Torah that had never been revealed before. And so their job is to reveal the Torah, and then the teachers pick up their teachings and spread them out into the world. And so if you look, wherever you're inspired, then you have to know that whoever inspires you was also inspired. Where did he get his inspiration from? And so you follow it back, teacher before teacher before teacher, and you'll see that it all ends up in the same place. But Rabbi Nachman's explanations give us practical, grounded teachings for every single thing based on the Kabbalah and based on the teachings of the other Hasidic masters.
Wow, well, this is all very interesting. I feel like there could be 200 more questions. So if I can just ask if you have anything to add, considering we're coming to the end of this interview, anything that relates to the work you're doing these days, etc.
Well, I really would love to invite everyone to come to our YouTube channel. There's hundreds of classes over there on any subject that you'd like to talk about. And also, you can write me at my Facebook, friend me on Facebook, or write me on Gmail, Rabbi Avraham Shira, and ask me your own individual question, because not everything has to be public, obviously. And I found that over the years, the most powerful way that we can connect is one-on-one. That the world loves the idea of talking to large groups of people, but I find that it's much more effective to talk one-on-one or in small groups of people, because there's that connection again, that intimacy, that sincerity that flows between the people, and that's really what we need. That's really the healing. The information is important, but it's the sense of belonging to something much greater than ourselves that we get by connecting to each other. That belonging really is that which heals us. And the information helps us on our path. But I need to know that I'm part of a living path here. And that Judaism is not just another religion. It is much greater. It is a lifestyle. It's a nation. It's a history. It's a worldview. It is a practice. It is a path. It is all things for all people, depending on where we go. And that's, truthfully, we didn't mention that I teach non-Jews who are interested in conversion and try to bring them into the conversion pathway. And that's an interesting discipline unto itself, because many very serious and sincere spiritual people have been taught very damaging metaphysical ideas. And really they need to have their software rewritten, rewired, to understand that the idea of the old-time religion that was given to us, and I was part of that at a certain point in my life, is not really the truth, and it damages people. It hurts families and relationships. And so a lot of converts face this challenge of, how do I not only learn something new, but how do I get rid of the old? And we need to really do both. We need to clear our minds so that we can receive something truly new, and that renewal will continue throughout our lives.
Wow, well, thank you, Rabbi Shira, for giving us a window into the world that you present. We've got a storm raging outside right now, so I think it may be time to wrap this up. I personally am a fan of the Patreon classes every day. I get my dose of spirituality and knowledge, and it's very, very, it's chizuk for me, it's strength for me, especially during these times right now that we're going through, when the world is in a difficult state, more than we've known it. So I want to say, this is thank you to Rabbi Shira.
Thank you.
May you go from strength to strength with good health always for you and your family.
Amen.
And we're signing off now. So good night and Shabbat Shalom from Eretz Yisrael. Good night.
Shabbat Shalom. Good night.